Hey crew, it's Bit, and I'm back with another Bible study, and today we are going to be diving back into Deuteronomy. But before we begin, if you're new here, if you're unfamiliar with what I am doing, I am having a very unconventional Bible study. I hold some very unconventional views, and I suggest you start in Genesis. You don't have to, it's up to you. If you're already caught up, we're going to dive into Deuteronomy. Because we left off in Deuteronomy, and we're going to start in 22 because we left off in 21. There will be a good bit to talk about today. I will probably be stepping on some toes today. Again, it is not intentional. I am not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. It's not my fault that your book says these things, right? I love this book because it has great truths, but there are a lot of things that are really not right, and I refuse to admit that God would put down as law, right? Some of the things we have already talked about, and some of those things are in today. So, let's dive into some of these various laws. If you see your brother's ox or sheep straying, you must not ignore it. Be sure to return it to your brother. If your brother does not live near you, or if you do not know who he is, you are to take the animal home to remain with you until your brother comes seeking it, and then you can return it to him. And you shall do the same for his donkey, his cloak, or anything your brother has lost and you have found. You must not ignore it. If you see your brother's donkey or ox fallen on the road, you must not ignore it. You must help him lift it up. This is what Jesus was referencing when he was talking about, when they asked him about the law, right? And he was like, well, if your brother's donkey falls on a Sabbath, would you lift it up? Right? This is what it's talking about right here. This, in a large part, doesn't nullify the Sabbath, right? But it's the invalidation of the inviolability of the Sabbath. You should absolutely hold the Sabbath. You should hold a day in reserve for the Creator. You should spend it learning more about Him or showing His love to someone else. That should be what you are doing with your Sabbath. But sometimes it is necessary to do a little bit of work. Sometimes that work is the showing of love, and sometimes that work is rounding up somebody else's cows that got out. Or if you find their property, bringing it back to them. Now, they had laws restricting how far they could walk on the Sabbath day. And if they walked too far, they were to be hidden with blunt objects until they were no more. And that was just part of the thing, because that day is to be held holy. And this, in large part, violates that, which is good. Right? You should hold the Sabbath. I'm not ever going to take away from that. But it is not a, if you don't, beat you in the head with a rock. Ever. A woman must not wear a woman must not wear men's clothing, and a man must not wear women's clothing, for whoever does these things is detestable to the Lord your God. There is a whole lot in that one sentence right there, and it is meant for the deception. If we go back to Sodom and Gomorrah and the lesson that we learned from there, and the forcing of things that was happening there, and the actual sins of Sodom and Gomorrah, which was not being homosexual, it was the deception and the force and the violence attributed with it, right? We talked about that in the Sodom and Gomorrah video. This is talking not about a woman wearing a pair of pants to go to work, or even a man wearing a kilt to run around in the highlands. This is talking about you trying to pass yourself off as something that you were not born as. I'm an incredibly flexible person. I hold a lot of beliefs, and I believe in your personal freedom as much as possible. The only place that I ever draw a line is that you were born wrong, because my God does not do wrong, right? You thinking that is a problem that we can try to work through, not here, not in comments, because that never works, but in a personal one-on-one space. You can talk about things and why you feel that way. It is perfectly acceptable to be an effeminate man or to be a masculine woman. It is. It is, to me, in my estimation, homosexuality is not a sin. God uses that as a tool that he uses to stop this bloodline for whatever reason, right? It is no hate, no malice. Things didn't quite go the right way. And so you get to be happy with someone and not procreate. I really do believe that. And it's not a judgment on anybody. It's not a judgment on a bloodline or anything of that nature. It is nature taking its course. It is God using the tools, right? But you get to be happy. The problem comes in deception, either self-deception or the deceiving of others. That is violence. If you are deceiving someone about sexual relations, you are being violent to them. You are forcing something on them that is not right. And so that is where this line is about, right? People take it way too far. And like everything else, God's not in the minutia, right? He gives you the grand scope of it. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. That is the sum of the law. That is the greatest commandment. It is not about not letting somebody be themselves. It is about not deceiving yourself or others. I know that stepped on toes. I'm sorry, but it was not intentional to step on toes. There's a lot going to be in here today. Ooh. If you come across a bird's nest with chicks or eggs, either in a tree or on the ground along the road, and the mother is sitting on the chicks or eggs, you must not take the mother along with the young. You may take the young, but be sure to let the mother go, so that it may be well with you and you may prolong your days. That is about conservation, right? That is hunting conservation 101. That whether you're gathering flowers or you're harvesting fish or game, you need to be conscious of what you're doing. You don't take too much. Don't overextend. And so what is happening in this one particular instance is you're allowing the procreation of the next generation, even though you're taking this generation. The same with flowers, right? If you're going and you're harvesting flowers, you should not take the whole patch. You should let some of it go to seed so that it can germinate and go to the next part. It's about being responsible, and that's what this particular paragraph is about right here. This verse, these two verses, is about being responsible stewards for the earth. If you build a new house, you are to construct a railing around your roof so that you do not bring blood guilt on your house if someone falls for it. Be a responsible property owner. Make sure that you are operating in a safe manner in the things that you are doing. Not plant your vineyard with two types of seed. If you do, the entire harvest will be defiled, both the crop you plant and the fruit of your vineyard. I've never had a vineyard, so I'm not sure on the specifics of this one. So if you've ever worked in a vineyard, I would be very interested to know, like if you had, like, are they talking about two different types of grapes? Are they talking about like a wild grape and a domesticated grape? Or are they talking about like planting wheat in between your I'm very interested to know what exactly, because I do like the new way that we're getting towards gardening out here for the people who are doing sustainable things, where you interplant, and I'm wondering if that specifically would have some kind of detrimental effect. Like if you planted strawberries around your grapevines, would that make a difference? If y'all know, let me know. I'll deep dive it one day, but I haven't got there yet. Do not plow with an ox and a donkey yoked together. Do not be unevenly yoked. This is a very important thing that it goes with the wool and linen, but that is separate for a reason. But an ox and a donkey do not work the same. They don't have the same capacity for work. They don't pull from the same point of gravity. They are two different animals, and they are not meant to work together. That is a real thing on many levels. There will be people that judge for many different reasons, right? Some people judge on this, and that's the most arbitrary, idiotic thing. But where your morals align affects just as much as the physicality described here. If you are working with someone who you do not morally align with, if your ethics are not aligned together as a tribe, and you have differing morals, you do not need to be working together. Point blank, the end. You don't need to be involved with somebody who has the opposite morals of you. Do not be yoked together with someone whose style is completely and totally different from yours. Do not work. I mean, you can work in harmony with people, right? Because the ox can be over here doing this thing, and the donkey can be over here doing this thing, and neither one of them need to attack each other, and both of them can bring value to your farm. But if you put them together when they should not be, it is going to cause friction because one will pull more than the other, and the other one's it's a donkey. So, just saying, be very careful in your selection of who you choose to associate yourself with. Keep your tribe as wide as possible. Always. But be very careful about who you let in. And you are to make tassels on the four corners of the cloak you wear. This is part of the whole Levitical thing. Now this cloak was an identifier, right? We're going to get into that very soon, but I'm going to go ahead and just talk about it now because we will be talking about it in a minute. But the cloak that they wore was like the prayer shawl, right? But it's also how they covered up to sleep. It's also an identifying mark. These four tassels have to do with that. And it also has to, like, the decorations on it. So this man from this house would have this decoration, and this cloak is his security. We'll see that again in a few minutes, but this is the first reference, I think, to it. There's several references we'll be going through, and that's what they're talking about, is the cloak of security. People talk about a security blanket, right? That's where the origins of this come from. It's if I needed to borrow something from you, I would give you my cloak to hold. And then when I brought back the thing that I borrowed from you, you would give me my cloak back. I was securing your property with my blanket of security. All right, now we're going to get into some very step on some toes. If anything I've already said has offended you, you probably do not want to stick around for this part of the talk. Suppose a man marries a woman, has relations with her, and comes to hate her. And he then accuses her of shameful conduct and gives her a bad name. I'm saying, I married this woman and had relations with her, but I discovered she was not a virgin. There's a lot to unpack in that first round. The first two lines right there, right? Suppose a man marries a woman and has relations with her, and he comes to hate her. That happens, right? That happens quite often because people back then didn't really get to choose their spouse, right? You were kind of assigned a spouse through parental negotiations. You would kind of be tossed around like property. But like even today, when we have the ability to choose who we share our soul with, we choose the wrong ones a lot. Like we choose people who talk down to us, or people who raise their hands to us or their voice to us in an angry manner. We choose people who make fun of us. We choose people who are not good to us at all the time. We refuse to raise our standards to the point where we have to mesh before we will enter into this. People get on the phone and enter in their information and meet up with a random person to just share their soul with. It's a little bit scary. But that is the reason why this happens, because you don't spend the time to make sure that you do mesh before you do those things. But then it gets really wild because this is quick, right? This isn't they've been married for 30 years and now they sleep in separate bedrooms. This is y'all just got married. And he comes to hate her like on the wedding night. That sounds awful superficial to me, right? It does not sound like something beneficial at all. But then he's going to say she was sleeping around. And claim that she wasn't a virgin. Now, back in these days, a woman's chastity has a lot of value. You got a much higher worth out of having intact things. And in order to ensure that, they had rituals and things that they did, right? And then the young woman's father and mother shall bring proof of her virginity to the city elders at the gate, and say to the elders, I gave my daughter in marriage to this man, but he has come to hate her. And now he has accused her of shameful conduct, saying, I discovered that your daughter was not a virgin, but here is proof of her virginity. And they shall spread out the cloth before the city elders. Without going into too much detail, what happened here was they would take this cloth and lay it out, and then it was kind of like going to the gynecologist, but probably not as pleasant. And I know that going to the gynecologist is not in the least bit pleasant. But the priest would perform this ceremony to ensure that all of the pieces were intact, and you know what I'm talking about, but I can't say the word. And the bleeding would be the proof. And so they would keep this rag with this blood that's, I'm assuming, somehow notarized, so that if this case pops up and this marriage that they arranged where they sold their daughter for money or goods or services or whatever it happens to be, they sold their daughter, and this guy then accuses them, they have proof. I find it hard to believe personally that this is God ordained. I just do. You may disagree with me. I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm probably more fine with you disagreeing with me than you are with me disagreeing with you. They shall spread out the cloth before the city elders, and the elders of that city shall take the man and punish him. And they are to fine him 100 shekels of silver and give them to the young woman's father, because this man has given a virgin of Israel a bad name. And she shall remain his wife. He must not divorce her as long as he lives. And again, I personally have a problem with that. Like, I don't want to say I met God, because God is beyond the concept of meeting him, but I have been sheltered in his hands and given a guided tour of the universe. And that's not to isolate me out. You can do that too. But I can tell you from my experience, my experiential, that is not how he operates. You're going to give the man who defiles your daughter is going to pay you 100 shekels. And then it's just going to be cool. He's going to be like, man, she is a, insert 4-letter word that I can't say on YouTube here, and just give me some money. And not even make it up to her, because she still has to live with this bag, bro. Like, she still has to live with this dude who's like, I don't like the way you look. You're a little bit too thick for me. Or you're a little bit too skinny for me. Or maybe I don't like your teeth. Or maybe I don't like your hair. Or whatever it happens to be. He just decides, I don't like X, so I'm going to say Y. And now she just has to stay there forever, because that is her lot in life. Nope. Nope. Sorry. And again, I'm okay with you disagreeing with me, but I refuse. That is not God ordained. But wait, there's more. If, however, the accusation is true and no proof of the young woman's virginity is found, so if you got rid of that notarized piece of paper, you're in trouble, boss. She can be brought to the door of her father's house, and there the men of the city will stone her to death. For she has committed an outrage in Israel by being promiscuous in her father's house. So you must purge the evil from among you. Good thing they wasn't trying that with Mary around, huh? If a man is found lying with another man's wife, both the man who slept with her and the woman must die. You must purge the evil from Israel. Now, I fully believe in holding to account both parties indulging in that too, in adultery, right? If you are committed to a person and you have no respect for them and you decide to cheat on them, I am for you bearing the fruit of your action. I just do not think it should be stones. I understand just how disruptive this is. I understand it is a terrible thing to commit adultery. It is a betrayal of trust on a fundamental level. It's a betrayal of your own trust of yourself on a fundamental level, but it's a betrayal of a person who trusted you on a fundamental level. So I do not condone adultery at all. But I am fully on board with both parties being held fully to account in every instance that it happens, right? As long as both parties are aware of the situation. But I don't think it should be hitting them in the heads. I don't. Like, there has to be another solution to that. If there is a virgin pledged in marriage to a man, and another man encounters her in the city and sleeps with her, you must take both of them out to the gate of that city and stone them to death. The young woman because she did not cry out in the city, and the man because he violated his neighbor's wife. And so you must purge the enemy or the evil from among you. What if she did? What if just nobody heard? Now, I understand, like, our life these days are way more isolated than it would have been in the city then, right? They're living on the edge of the desert at the very minimum. There's not a whole lot of air conditioning available, right? And so the windows are open, the houses are close, there's not a whole lot of room between them. I understand the argument. But, like, he could be holding her face. That happens. A pillow. That happens. Clothing. That happens. All of these things are possible, right? You're going to hit her in the head. No. Again, no. But if the man encounters a betrothed woman in the open country and he overpowers her and lies with her, only the man who has done this must die. Do nothing to the young woman, because she has committed no sin worthy of death. This case is just like one in which a man attacks his neighbor and murders him. When he found her in the field, the betrothed woman cried out, but there was no one to save her. So here you will assume innocence, but in the city you will not. He could have taken her by surprise and done whatever, but kill her anyway. And if a man encounters a virgin who is not pledged in marriage, and he seizes her and lies with her, and they are discovered, then the man who lay with her must pay the young woman's father 50 shekels of silver, and she must become his wife because he has violated her. He must not divorce her as long as he lives. And again, no. What it's saying right here, when he says seizes her, that's exactly what it sounds like. It is taking her by force and making her do the thing that she does not want to do. And if they're caught, then he has to pay 50 shekels. Not even the 100 shekels that you got to pay somebody else, but the 50 shekels. Only half price, bruh. It's only half price. And then she has to marry him. And she has to stay with him unless he gets displeased and gives her a notice. She has to stay with him for the rest of her life. That is not God ordained. No, it is not. That is not from God. And you can disagree with me. I'm okay with that. A man is not to marry his father's wife, so that he will not dishonor his father's marriage bed. Exclusion from the congregation. No man with crushed or severed genitals may enter the assembly of the Lord. There is a level of intentionality that goes with everything. There is a very good possibility that truth lies in this verse. But I don't know that I can believe that if the man accidentally has his testicles crushed, that he's excluded. Now, if you intentionally do things, that is intentionally choosing things, and you are free to intentionally choose the wrong path all you want. You can absolutely choose the wrong path freely for all of your life. But there may be consequences. I can't tell you that there are, because this could be one of those verses that is completely wrong. But there is a level of intentionality, and there are choices. No one of illegitimate birth may enter the assembly of the Lord, nor may any of his descendants, even to the 10th generation. That's interesting. Keep that in mind. No Ammonite or Moabite or any of their descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord, even to the 10th generation, for they did not meet you with food or water on your way out of Egypt. And they hired Balaam, son of Beor, from Pethor in Aram Naharaim, to curse you. Yet the Lord your God would not listen to Balaam, for the Lord your God hath turned the curse into a blessing for you. Because the Lord your God loves you, you are not to seek peace or prosperity from him as long as you live. And so we have another consistency error, right? This is not the story we got of Balaam. The story we got of Balaam was that they sent for Balaam, and he came down and he talked to God after making sacrifices. Although he was not an Israeli, he talked to God face to face. And God told him then, like, he didn't ask for a curse, right? It says here that he did, but he didn't ask for a curse in the story we got before. He asked for a word from God, and God told him that there would be blessing, that there would not be a curse, that there would be a blessing. So he didn't speak the curse any of the times that he went, right? Now, Balaam is also the one where the donkey, right? God tells him to go. Well, first tells him not to go, then tells him to go, and then stops him by making his donkey turn, and then get mad at him because he's mad at the donkey for not doing what the donkey is supposed to do. And then, like, that whole story, we went through that whole story, but that is not the story we are getting here. And so, we have a consistency here. And you can apologize for it, but I don't. It is a consistency error. It is two different stories. Do not despise an Edomite, for he is your brother. Do not despise an Egyptian, for you lived as a foreigner in his land. But I thought you were the slaves. I thought you came out of slavery. I thought you were slaves. But now you're a foreigner. You lived as a foreigner now. But before you were slaves. It really gets hard to keep track when it jumps back and forth so much. Because these are two different things, right? Now, you can make the argument that they went into the land as a foreigner and became slaves. Okay. It's not what he's saying. He is saying that do not despise an Egyptian because you lived as a foreigner. That's not as a slave. It means that you were subject to different laws than a native-born person. But not that you were a slave. There's a big distinction there. A big historical distinction there. And I don't know which one of the two stories is the truth. But it's probably this one. Because you lived as a foreigner in this land. The third generation of children born to them may enter the assembly of the Lord. So, if you're an Edomite or an Egyptian, you can come at the third generation. But if you are actually an Israeli and are illegitimate, then you cannot up to the 10th generation. When you are encamped against your enemies, then you shall keep yourself from every wicked thing. If any man among you becomes unclean because of a nocturnal emission, then he must leave the camp and stay outside. And when evening approaches, he must wash with water, and when the sun sets, he may return to the camp. You must have a place outside of the camp to go and relieve yourself, and you must have a digging tool in your equipment so that when you relieve yourself, you can dig a hole and cover up your excrement. That is good marching tactics. Anytime that you ever go off somewhere, you should do that. Especially if you're in numbers. Especially if them numbers are around 3 million. For the Lord your God walks throughout your camp to protect you and deliver your enemies to you. Your camp must be holy, lest he see anything unclean among you and turn away from you. Do not return a slave to his master if he has taken refuge with you. Let him live among you, wherever he chooses, in the town of his pleasing. Do not oppress him. I got a question. And maybe you can help me with the answer in the comments, right? We just saw yesterday where they're going into the land west of the Jordan, and they're to take out 28 million conservative estimate people and put them to the sword. But once they get past that particular point, if they go forth and they conquer other peoples and they put all of the men to the sword, then they can take these people and use them, right? Well, if they run away from this one city where they're being held, right? Say that they went to Lebanon and they come from Lebanon and they go to Tel Aviv, right? And they stay there with their captives. And then the captive gets loose and it gets to Jerusalem. Do you return to Tel Aviv? Does the same rule apply if you're talking about Israeli slaves as applies if you're talking about other people's slaves who make it to you? I'm just curious how the math works. Because again, we have a consistency error. No daughter or son of Israel is to be a shrine prostitute. You must not bring the wages of a prostitute, whether female or male, into the house of the Lord your God to fulfill any vow, because both are detestable to the Lord your God. I'm not going to touch that one. Do not charge your brother interest on money, food, or any other type of loan. You may charge a foreigner interest, but not your brother, so that the Lord your God may bless you in everything to which you put your hand in the land you are entering to possess. So this, again, is banning usury for the Israeli people to the Israeli people. But everybody else is fair game. Which is fine. I am pro-capitalism, right? I believe that a moderate interest rate is a just gain on your investment in someone else's project. Right? I do. If you make a vow to the Lord your God, but do not be slow to keep it, because he will surely require it of you, and you will be guilty of sin. But if you refrain from making a vow, you will not be guilty of sin. Be careful to follow through on what comes from your lips, because you have freely vowed to the Lord your God with your own mouth. That is absolutely true. If you must make a vow in the name of God, you might want to hold on to that. You might want to complete it, and you might want to complete it quickly. That is all I'm going to say on that. We're already going into time, right? And when you enter your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat your fill of grapes, but you must not put any in your basket. And when you enter your neighbor's grain field, you may pluck the heads of grain with your hand, but you must not put a sickle into your neighbor's grain. This is to say that you can go and eat, right? If you are hungry and you see a field and there is fruit on the vine or on the tree or on the bush, and you are hungry, you are able to eat. But you are not to carry it away with you, right? You must not put any in a basket. You may eat your fill. The grain field, you can go and pick off a head of grain and eat it, or enough to make a loaf of bread and eat it. But you can't gather it, sickle it, and carry it off to sell for profit. That is theft. We have laws where you can't go into a grocery store and just eat. But if we were living according to the rules of the Bible, if you were hungry and you went up to the produce section and you ate a few grapes, that would be okay. If you were walking around with a whole bag of grapes and you ate all the grapes and then just didn't pay, that is theft. Big difference. And we have laws, so I do not recommend you doing that at the produce department. Marriage and divorce laws. Here's another one. If a man marries a woman and she becomes displeasing to him because he finds some indecency in her, he may write her a certificate of divorce, hand it to her, and send her away from his house. If, after leaving his house, she goes and becomes another man's wife, and the second man hates her and writes her a certificate of divorce, hands it to her, and sends her away from his house, or if he dies, then the husband who divorced her first may not remarry her after she has been defiled, for that is an abomination to the Lord. You should not bring sin upon the land that the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. Marriage vows are to be taken very seriously. You are pledging your soul to another soul. You should be very clear of who the person is before you do so, and you should be willing to forgive a whole lot of things in the process. Not violence, not abuse, but things that are stemmed from ignorance, right? A lot of people come from different types of upbringings and they don't have the same base level of knowledge. So there are things that need to be communicated. And if they're not communicated, they cannot be resolved. You should always be working towards resolution in a non-abuse situation. No-fault divorce is an abomination. It is one of the worst things that ever happened to civilization. And it's right here. He finds some indecency in her. He doesn't like something. Maybe she talks back. Maybe she has her own mind. Maybe she wants to learn something. Maybe she wants to be her own person. Maybe she said no one too many times. Maybe it's something she cooked. Maybe she didn't clean something. Whatever he decides is enough. That's enough. He can just write her a piece of paper and give it to her and send her on her way. That's terrible. Now, he should not be overbearing, and he should not be like, this house should be spotless every day, and I should come home to a meal every day, because that was their lifestyle, right? The man worked, the women stayed at home. That was normal. He should not be overbearing in his responsibility to his wife, but she should not be negligent in her responsibility to her husband. They should be working on communication and clearing these things up rather than writing notes of divorce. If after leaving his house she goes and becomes another man's wife, right? So this is giving the possibility of remarriage. That's laying that out. But then the second man, maybe she's too mouthy for him too, writes her a certificate of divorce, hands it to her, and sends her away. Or if he dies, then you can't go back to the man who despised you and gave you a divorce, right? First off, why would you? Because it's comforting, right? Because that ex is the comfort that you know, as opposed to what you may not. And maybe it's been a couple of years, right? Maybe you've been remarried for a decade and now you're twice married. You're 35 years old. That could be a problem trying to find a new husband. So you see the old husband and you're like, well, maybe. It's not a good idea. Like on many levels. If you didn't mesh then, you're not going to mesh now. You shouldn't. I'm not going to talk about the idiom about trying to put your excrement back where it belongs, right? Or where it came from. Oh, for that is an abomination to the Lord. And that part, like, it doesn't make sense. It is not conducive to a happy going forward, right? It's not going to work out well. There's just no situation. I know some people who were married, divorced, and got remarried years later, and it worked out. It did. But their odds were very slim. And it only worked out because they both changed in such significant ways that they were not even the same people that they were before. It was like two new people meeting again, right? So it is never to say never or that it is not possible. Anything is possible, but it is not it is almost never advisable. If a man is newly married, he must not be sent to war or pressed into any duty. For 1 year, he is free to stay at home and bring joy to the wife he has married. Hallelujah. You should be bringing joy to the wife you have married. Do not take a pair of millstones or even an upper millstone as security for a debt, because that would be taking one's livelihood as a security. Do not take the tools that a man uses as security. Right? This specifies a millstone, but it goes for a plow or a shovel or whatever you use to make your living. Right? It could be a computer or a briefcase. It could be whatever you use to make your living. You should not use that as security against a debt. You should not accept that as security for anyone else's debt either. If a man is caught kidnapping one of his Israelite brothers, whether he treats him as a slave or sells him, the kidnapper must die. So you must purge evil from among you. I wholeheartedly believe that. I also believe that if you're practicing conquesting, you take slaves, you should face the same issue. You're a kidnapper. In cases of infectious skin diseases, be careful to diligently follow everything the Levitical priest instructs you. Be careful to do as I have commanded them. But remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam on the journey after you came out of Egypt. We talked about that already, but Miriam and Aaron had a problem with Moses' dark-skinned wife that he picked up at the Sudan. And then shortly after that, Miriam come down with an infectious skin disease that affected half of her body, and she later died from it. And then they weren't able to get water anymore because their sorceress died. It's an interesting story. You should definitely check it out. When you lend anything to your neighbor, do not enter his house to collect security. You are to stand outside while the man to whom you are lending brings the security out to you. If he is a poor man, you must not go to sleep with the security in your possession. Be sure to return it to him by sunset, so that he may sleep in his own cloak and bless you. And this will be credited to you as righteousness before the Lord your God. This is an interesting turn right here. This is talking about the cloak that we were talking about earlier. This is one of those references. And oops, dropped my glasses. And so it's saying that you should not keep it overnight. Right? If you borrow something, you should give it back that same day. But if it's not given back to you, you should go back and give them the stuff that they gave you for security. It doesn't say anything about getting your stuff back. But I'm sure that happens too, right? But then you're supposed to, like, you go and you get your stuff back, you give them their thing back, their security blanket, and it will be credited as a righteousness to you that you did that. Do not oppress a hired hand who is poor and needy, whether he is a brother or a foreigner residing in one of your towns. You are to pay his wages each day before sunset, because he is poor and depends on them. Otherwise he may cry out to the Lord against you, and you will be guilty of sin. If you hire someone, you pay your wages on time. Now, we have a system here in the United States that most people use, and that is a deferred payment plan where, like, say I were to start work this week, I would not get paid for 2 weeks because the time would go in next week and then it takes a week to process and cut the checks. That's how we do it. It should not take an extra week for you to get your check. You should be paid on time. Whenever your agreed upon time is, you should be paid. And if you're not being paid on time, you should not be working for the people you are working for. Fathers shall not be put to death for their children, nor children for their fathers. Each is to die for his own sin. But up to the 10th generation, if it's illegitimate, that sin is upon the child. Boy, they don't even try to get separated, right? It's in a different verse, like a different chapter. And that's the only thing. Like, we have many instances already of people being punished for the sins of their fathers. And so, and not just that, but the promise that that will happen from God. I will curse your generations going forward. If you do this, then your generations will be cursed until the X generation. There are several different generations and different instances. That's why I say that. So, this is another direct contradiction to other parts of the Bible. And you can apologize for them. We can disagree. But this is what it says. Do not deny justice to the foreigner or the fatherless. Do not take a widow's cloak as security. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from that place. Or were you foreigners? Okay? Therefore I am commanding you to do this. If you are harvesting in your field and forget a sheaf there, do not go back and get it. It is to be left for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the works of your hands. And when you beat the olives from your trees, you must not go over the branches again. What remains will be for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow. And when you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you must not go over the vines again. What remains will be for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow. Remember that you were slaves in the land of Egypt, and therefore I am commanding you to do this. That is, be charitable, right? That is, again, that if you are hungry, this food is there for you, and you are responsible for leaving it there for them. You should not be so greedy in the fruits of your labors that you do not leave some to be spread around. When you harvest the fruits of your labors, you should ensure that other people get fruit too. All of those are good things to live by. If there is a dispute between men, they are to go to court to be judged, so that the innocent may be acquitted and the guilty condemned. If the guilty man deserves to be beaten, the judge shall have him lie down and be flogged in his presence with the number of lashes as crime warrants. He may receive no more than 40 lashes, lest your brother be beaten any more than that and be degraded in your sight. Justice delayed is justice not done. The victim deserves justice more than the perpetrator deserves his second chance even. Because you chose to victimize someone else, you chose to become less than that person you victimized. And so you should always face the consequences of the actions that you take in violence against someone else. Do not muzzle an ox while it is treading out the grain. That is to say, treat your animals in the proper manner, but treat your laborers in the proper manner too. There's a lot in this that people don't normally read, right? If you were to take this beast of burden, and the way that they would do it, there's a threshing floor, right? And they would take these ox and they would go across the threshing floor with this big stick that would, like they would drag the stick across the grain, and it would beat the heads of the grain to where it would release the kernels. And then the ox is able to eat some of that while he's working. That's all it's saying. It is perfectly okay for the laborer to bear the fruits of its labor. That is not to say that communism is the way, right? But people should be fairly compensated for their work. They should be taken care of in the midst of their work, because this ox is getting to eat while it's working. It is bearing the fruit of the labors in the midst of the labors. There's a lot to read there. When brothers dwell together and one of them dies without a son, the widow must not marry outside the family. Her husband's brother is to take her as his wife and fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law for her. The first son she bears will carry on the name of the dead brother, so that his name will not be blotted out from Israel. What if she doesn't like him? Like, it's entirely possible to not like your brother-in-law. Like, I don't know if that's a revelation to you. Like, I like mine. I have some good brother-in-laws, but some people don't. Like, some people have some crazy going on, right? And now you're just saying, okay, well, your husband died. Go see his brother. You're his wife now. What if she really loved her husband? I mean, the chances are slim, right? But what if it was an actual genuine love relationship and now the love of her life has died and you're telling her that she has to go sleep with his brother. And you're trying to tell me that that is God ordained. No. No. It's not. But if the man does not want to marry his brother's widow, she is to go to the elders at the city gate and say, my husband's brother refuses to preserve his brother's name in Israel. He is not willing to perform the duty of a brother-in-law for me. So he doesn't get a choice either. So nobody is getting a choice in this situation. Like, he doesn't even get to write her divorce and give it to her. Like, but that's God ordained. Both of them have to sleep with somebody they don't want. Well, obviously, in this particular scenario, she's wanting it. She's like, yeah. But in the other scenario, she's not, right? It's very, very slim chance that you're actually going to want to be passed along to the brother-in-law. Like, I'm not going to say it's impossible because nothing is impossible, but it's a very, very slim chance, right? You got to grant me that. And then the elders of his city shall summon him and speak with him. And if he persists and says, I did not want to marry her, his brother's widow shall go up to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandal, spit in his face, and declare, this is what is done to the man who will not maintain his brother's line. And his family's name in Israel will be called the house of the unsandaled. Hi, bro. God definitely had his hand right in that one. That one right there is exactly how I would expect God to handle that situation. Here, there's more. This gets great. And if two men are fighting and the wife of one steps in to rescue her husband from the one striking him, and she reaches out her hand and grabs his genitals, you're to cut off her hand. You must show her no pity. I'm just saying. Like, first and foremost, I'm going to put this one out here real firm. If you are a woman listening to this, listen to this. If your man is in a fight, do not get involved. I don't care who else is involved. Unless it's another woman, then discretion is yours. But if your man is in a one-on-one fight, for sure. But even if it's like 2 or 3, do not get involved. You put him in more danger by trying to break that up or get involved than he is in now. There is a chance that an atrocity will happen and you will have to witness that, and that is a terrible thing. But there is a chance that this altercation will end with a lot less violence if you are not involved. They will beat him and leave him, and that is a terrible thing, but they will beat him and leave him. If you get involved, they will beat both of you, and it will be a worse beating. Stay out of it. It is hard to do. I understand that is. I'm not saying this lightly. Unless you are specifically trained for the situation or if you have something to handle the situation, stay out of it. He does not need to worry about you in the middle of a fight. But if you are determined to involve yourself and you accidentally grab the genitals, I don't think they should cut off your hand. Right? Now, it's a low blow, but sometimes, like, there's no such thing as a fair fight. If anybody told you that there is, they lied to you. Every single fight is a fight to the death. I know that directly contradicts what I just said, but I say that because any missed blow can lead to death. People do not realize the fragility of the human mind, and if you hit the bucket hard enough, it will rattle the bearings loose, and you will not be able to function anymore. Every single time that you are in a fight, there is a chance for death, and that is an atrocity. That's what I was talking about. It will be less violent if there is less people involved. That is also true. But you don't need to get your hand cut off if you do get involved and accidentally grab some nuts. Like, it's not something you should do, but there's no such thing as a fair fight. There's not. You shall not have differing weights in your bag, one heavy and one light. You shall not have two differing measurings for your house, one large and one small. You shall maintain accurate and honest weights and measures so that you may live long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. For everyone who behaves dishonestly in regard to these things is detestable to the Lord your God. Remember what the Amalekites did to you on your way from Egypt, how they met you on your journey when you were tired and weary, and they attacked all your stragglers. They had no fear of God. When the Lord your God gives you rest from the enemies around you in the land he is giving you to possess as an inheritance, you are to blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. Amalek is included in the 28 million body count we were talking about earlier. We're not getting into geography today. That takes more time. We're trying to burn through some of this Deuteronomy. I'm ready to get to the actual conquest of the land. So, all right, we will wrap up with 26. When you enter the land that the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, and you take possession of it and settle in it, you are to take some of the first fruits of all your produce from the soil of the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and put them in a basket. Then go to the place your Lord your God will choose as a dwelling for his name, to the priest who is serving at that time, and say to him, I declare today to the Lord your God that I have entered the land that the Lord swore to our fathers to give us. Then the priest shall take the basket from your hands and place it before the altar of the Lord your God, and you are to declare before the Lord your God, my father was a wandering Aramean, and he went down to Egypt, few in number, and lived there, and became a great nation, mighty and numerous. But the Egyptians mistreated us and afflicted us, putting us to hard labor. So we called out to the Lord, the God of our fathers, and the Lord our God, and the Lord heard our voice, and saw our affliction, toil, and oppression. And then the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and a great terror, signs and wonders. And he brought us to this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And now, behold, I have brought the first fruits of that land to you, O Lord, have given me. And my father was a wandering Aramean. Interesting. And he went down to Egypt, few in number, and lived there and became a great nation, mighty and numerous. Now, if you were to look at the land of Aramea, it includes the land that they have just taken possession of in the northern part, right? It also includes Syria, Lebanon, like large portions of that, up to the Euphrates River and up into Turkey to a large degree. And so, Aramean, not Israeli, not Jacobean, not Noahide, Aramean. That's interesting. It's interesting. Then you are to place the basket before the Lord your God and bow down before him. So you shall rejoice, you, the Levite, and the foreigner dwelling among you, in all the good things the Lord your God has given you and your household. When you have finished laying aside a tenth of all your produce in the third year, the year of the tithe, you are to give it to the Levite, the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow, that they may eat and be filled within your gates. Again, this is we talked about the tithe in another one and how you were supposed to joyfully and willfully give of the fruit of your labor. And then you shall declare in the presence of the Lord your God, I have removed from my house the sacred portion and have given it to the Levite, the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow, according to all the commandments you have given me. I have not transgressed or forgotten your commandments. I have not eaten any portion of the sacred portion while in mourning, or removed any of it while unclean, or offered any of it for the dead. I have obeyed the Lord my God. I have done everything you commanded me. Look down from your holy habitation from heaven, and bless your people Israel, and the land you have given us, as you swore to our fathers, a land flowing with milk and honey. The Lord your God commands you this day to follow these statutes and ordinances. You must be careful to follow them with all of your heart and all of your soul. Today you have proclaimed that the Lord is your God, and that you will walk in his ways, keep his statutes and commandments and ordinances, and listen to his voice. And today the Lord has proclaimed that you are his people and treasured possession, as he has promised, that you are to keep all his commandments, that he will set you high in praise and name and honor above all nations he has made, and that you will be a holy people to the Lord your God, as he has promised. And that's where we're going to wrap today up. There was a lot in here, right? We had a whole lot to talk about. There are great chunks of good things in this book. There are great chunks of not good things in this book. And you cannot convince me that the same God commanded all of them. Religion is an experience. My experience cannot be passed on to you other than through my words, right? This book, if I were to write a book, but if I were Moses and I were laying out the law, this is how I would do it. That is what is being done. This is the consolidation of a nation that was not and now is. It was brought forth in a day. When they left Egypt, they were Aramaeans living in a foreign land. And when they got to the Red Sea, they were Israelites, right? They became a people when they left Egypt. They were not a people when they were in Egypt. And that is something that is very important to pay attention to. It is important to note that this doctrine that they are setting forth in Deuteronomy, and that's what it is setting forth the history of the Israelis, what is being set forth, raises them above the surrounding nations, without a doubt. It brings them into a new level of understanding, but that does not mean that it is the correct understanding. And if it was God himself, the all-powerful creator and sustainer of life, he who is, was, and always shall be, then he could have perfectly set down the law and still left you free to transgress it. But that is not what happened. What happened is that people decided to rise above what was and become something more. That happens again even before we get to the New Testament. And then it happens in the New Testament. And then it happens in Protestantism. And then it happens in the American Revolution. Not to equate necessarily the book of Genesis with the American Revolution, but they are all steps on the progression of humanity expanding into a more divine nature. Not to say that we are divine, because we are not gods. We are a very tiny part of God. And we are divine, but we are not the divine. We are all divine souls on a path here to learn a lesson. I believe that we all agreed to the lesson before we got here. I believe that we are here to be the light, to show God's love. And that's where I'm going to wrap this one up. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a very difficult topic. I know that I hold very unconventional beliefs. I know that I step on toes. It is not intentional. I never mean offense to anyone. I truly do want everyone to know love and light in God. I want you to know the Creator. And if you don't, and you want to, you say something like this: Dear Heavenly Father, I come to you as a sinner, and I ask for your forgiveness. I freely accept the grace that you have freely extended, and I ask you to change my life to yours. And if you said anything remotely resembling that, and you meant it, then it will start to happen. He will change your life. If you allow him, if you surrender to his will, He will bless you in ways you cannot even fathom. And that's where we're going to leave it. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Bit State. Peace.